YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, and other popular digital media entertainment sites is a characteristic of the 21st century unseen before in human history. These sites widely changed how humans interact and consume entertainment and media. But why is it less acceptable to play video games, which is another form of digital entertainment? I started getting into video games around in middle school, and since then I probably played about a dozen or so games. Those dozen or so games that I have played, I have discussed among with friends, family, and even some online discussion forums. In addition, I have read articles to further my understanding of individual and social effects that video games have. Today, I would like to persuade you all to play video games as a hobby or accept those who play video games as a hobby since there are direct benefits for the individual and for society thanks to video games. I'd also like to debunk all the popular misconceptions that towards gamers. So, my question for you all today is why do people like to play video games? Simply because it's fun. Video games became popular among the youth during the 1980s in the golden age of the arcade system. But what I like to believe, what heavily cemented video games as a popular form of entertainment is thanks to home consoles like the NES. And since then, people like Chris Pruitt noticed that children who grew up playing video games have become or were more likely to become game playing adults. Why is that? It's because there are so many, there are dozens or even hundreds of genres that accommodate to each individual's playstyle. There's such a huge target audience for everybody. There's puzzle games, there's action adventure, there's role playing games, there's online games, there's mobile games, there's so much games that you can play. And it's so easily accessible. Since I'd like to think that video games is a pretty relatively is a relatively cheap hobby to pick up since every 5 years or so you probably have to spend about $500 and the hardest games to run the AAA games cost about $60 to $70 but you don't have to play those expensive games or you don't have to have such a powerful console or PC since the more popular games are actually relatively cheap to play since it is so optimized you don't even need the best system you don't even need the newest system to run those games games like Valorant games like CSGO League of Legends Minecraft they have such a huge following and they're all free except for Minecraft which costs $30 you could easily pour hundreds and thousands of hours into these games and since there's such a large player base, there's always something new and fun to experience. Since, but why are people so resilient against people playing video games if it's so accommodating? It's because there's a lot of popular misconceptions. One of the most popular misconceptions is that people who play video games tend to become more violent due to violent video games. And there is a correlation to it. A study conducted by Gentile DA observed that there was an increase in aggressiveness regardless of sex, age, initial aggressiveness, and parental involvement. But this is only if the people playing these types of games are only playing violent games for prolonged periods of times. Like they only want to play games that are extremely violent, like shooter games, like zombie games, you know. But this is also true vice versa. If you play games that are more pro-social, as observed by Bushman BJ, and he conducted a study, he observed that participants were more likely to help after a mishap and were more willing to assist and intervene in harassment situations. There's just such a huge stigma against video games because it's not as widely accepted and popularized. Even if there are millions of people who play video games, it's just not as popular as stuff like watching movies and TV shows. But movies and TV shows also have these negative effects. A study conducted by a different person named Grayton Mayer concluded through observation that similar increases of aggression occur when watching violence, which can also have long-term detrimental effects of a developing mind. That's why filters are already set in place for video games and movies, just to protect and mediate children's access or developing minds' access to such violent games. MPAA, that's what you see like rated R movies. Children must be or children under 17 years old must be accompanied by a guardian. ESRB, that company is responsible for rated games like rated R games, rated M games. Children must be accompanied by a guardian if they're under 17. It's set in place because children have yet to fully understand how the world works. They cannot differentiate between what's real, what's fake, um, what's happens in real life, and what happens in the game, what they see in the screen. Now, another popular misconception is that gamers tend to be a little bit more antisocial. Now, you might have you might have this belief too that's cemented a little bit. Now, let me ask you this: What do you think about someone? What do you think about a kid who sits down and plays video games for about 4 hours straight? You might think he's antisocial and that he's wasting their time, right? Now, think about a kid who plays guitar for 4 hours straight. You think that he's like developing his artistic skill and he's learning something useful. But why do why do these people what do these people who sit down playing video games for 4 hours straight and playing guitar for 4 hours straight have in common? They both think that it's fun. Now, why are you now why is it so negative when a child has while a child plays video games for 4 hours? Just proof that the brain gets stimulated. Proof by the aggressiveness and by the pro-socialness. You just have to mediate it. It's just it's due to because there's such a huge difference in perception since video games are relatively new. Now, this may not be apparent, but video games actually kindle social progress. What I mean by that is there are so many positive societal benefits thanks to video games. Uh, video games is a new Video games can be thought of as a new expressive form of art that incorporates both software and hardware technology. Games are now evaluated by the story, atmosphere, and world building. There's game awards, kind of like art awards, player reception, fan reception, which incentivize creations of new creative works by the companies and by the people who develop such games. And since there's such a mass popularity in playing video games now, there's a larger audience who could consume this artistic entertainment. And since they could consume this artistic entertainment, their creative receptions or it stimulates their creative receptions. Another thing, the how the video game industry works is best described by Yuko Oyama uh, as it exists within a complex interplay between hardware and software technologies. What we mean by that is that there's hardware and software are being pushed to its limits since it's there's more an incentive to uh, develop it since there's such a large audience who want to play video games. Sony, Microsoft, Nvidia, AMD, and many other hardware and software manufacturers are incentivized to further develop this new technology due to gamers. Or gamers could be one of the primary reasons. Now, there's the video game industry also has capitalistic ideals, which could be seen as good or bad. But in this scenario, I'm thinking of it as good, since people are more incentivized to participate in the new video game industry, since it is a multi-billion-dollar business. The U.S. makes about $60 billion just from video games alone, and there are other countries that just rely on video games due to like chip manufacturing. Japan makes billions of dollars too, thanks to video games. And it's not just these big companies, these um, civilizations. It's even little stuff like uh, Twitch streamers, YouTubers. They could people could. There's been a new career form thanks to video games. You don't need to be PewDiePie. You don't need to have hundreds of millions of subscribers. You could easily just have like 100,000 or a couple of 10,000. You just need to be brand sponsored, and you can make a living playing what you enjoy. There's a lot of variety. Now, let's wrap up the key ideas that we have discussed today to pick up video games as a hobby. The rapid popularity of video games in the past 50 years has ushered in an unprecedented era of digital entertainment. Despite sharing many similarities in terms of content, popularity, and its effects uh, in the human brain, video games have a more negative stigma in modern society. Despite having negative misconceptions of video games, the growth in popularity of playing video games can be an indication of the progress of the digital media era, as they help stimulate the individual and societal wants and needs. If properly mediated, an individual can gain more than from playing video games than their negatives, like the aggressiveness. Video games' popularity can be considered to be one of the major driving forces to improve technology and stimulate the economy. Chipset manufacturing, artistic endeavors. Now, to close off the speech, I would like to ask you all a simple question. Would you like to resist this new age of digital entertainment or usher the inevitable progress of digital entertainment? Thank you for listening to my presentation. This concludes my persuasive speech.